Andrew Yang is drawing new support from an unlikely group, Trump supporters.
I voted for Trump in 2016, and honestly, I'll probably vote for him again if Yang doesn't make it through.
Anthony Hegstrom is one of several Trump supporters who have shown up to his New Hampshire rallies, now considering themselves part of the Yang gang. Many feeling disenchanted with the rest of the Democratic ticket.
Honestly, I am a staunch Republican, but as he starts to explain why he believes the policies that he believes in, many of them make sense, and when he does win the nomination, I'm willing to give him a shot.
I am peeling off tens of thousands of disaffected Donald Trump voters. We have a system that's designed not to maximize our health and well-being. It's a system designed to maximize revenue on the part of private insurers, device companies, drug manufacturers.
Andrew Yang proposes setting prices for medical services and moving doctors to salaries rather than fees. He supports Medicare for all who want it, a public option.
Well, what Medicare for all means to many Americans is universal health care that's high quality and low or zero cost. And that is exactly what I'm championing. We need to provide health care to all Americans, but I would not get rid of all private insurance plans immediately, because millions of Americans are on those plans, enjoy those plans, in many cases negotiated for those plans in lieu of higher wages. The goal of the government has to be to demonstrate that we can outcompete the private insurance plans and squeeze them out of the market over time.
Yes, they will pay more in taxes, but less in health care.
Public health care, like the public subway. Right now, to ride the subway, you'd have to be either very poor Medicaid or very old Medicare. You're saying you got to get in the subway. I don't care if you want to lift a helicopter, get in the subway. What about the people who could opt out and want to have the freedom to opt out? Do you care about them and their freedom to opt out?
First, we should obviously be paying to relocate Americans away from places that are hit by climate change. We're already doing it. We relocated a town in Louisiana that became uninhabitable because the sea levels rose. And we know that town is not alone. That's playing out in coastal areas around the country.
And we need to put a price on carbon emissions, because that will help industries become much more efficient. We all know they just operate on the bottom line, so if it'll impact their bottom line to clean up their production, then that's what they'll do. And then we take that revenue and we move it towards sustainable energy sources like wind, solar.
On nuclear power, I agree with the research. We need to have everything on the table in a crisis situation, which this is. Other countries have had success with nuclear power, and the next generation thorium reactors have a wealth of potential. Thorium is not radioactive the way uranium is. It doesn't last as long, and you can't make a weapon out of it. We talk as if Donald Trump is the cause of all of our problems. He is not. He is a symptom, and we need to cure the disease. The 5 most common jobs in the United States right now are administrative and clerical work, retail and sales, food service and food prep, truck driving and transportation and manufacturing. Those 5 jobs comprise about half of all American jobs. And if you look at it, technology is already doing a number on each of these jobs. Like the first, administrative and clerical, includes call center workers, and AI is in the process of taking over that job. Retail and sales, 30% of malls are closing in the next 4 years. So the danger here is to think of it as artificial intelligence is coming. It's actually already eating up the most common jobs in our economy. We blasted away 4 million manufacturing jobs that were primarily based in Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri.
Anybody who could go down 300 to 3,000 feet in the mine sure in hell can learn how to program as well.
Well, one of the things I've said, Ari, is that someone who suggests that coal miners become coders is generally neither of those things. If you look at the numbers, 8% of Americans work in STEM fields, 92% do not. It is not realistic to say to 92% of Americans to somehow shoehorn themselves into the 8%. The reality is job retraining programs have not worked by the numbers. I'm a numbers guy. The success rates have been very low, 0 to 15%. Maybe a lot of Americans have no interest in coding, and going around saying you should learn how to code is unproductive at best and misleading at worst. The fact is that coding is like learning a foreign language that you have to become expert in. And that's not a realistic recommendation for millions of Americans. Instead, we have to stop confusing economic value and human value and put a dividend in place where we can all share in the incredible gains of the 21st century economy.
What is UBI and why will it work?
Well, if you've heard anything about me and my campaign, you've heard that I want to give every American adult $1,000 a month. And this seems far out or futuristic to some, but this is a deeply American idea. Thomas Paine was for it, Martin Luther King championed it, and one state has had a dividend in place for almost 40 years, Alaska, which gives $1,000 to $2,000 in oil money to every Alaskan every single year. So what I'm saying to the American people is that what oil is to Alaska, technology is to the entire country. Because we're in an era where technology is going to do more and more of the work. 30% of American malls and stores are closing in the next 4 years because Amazon is sucking up $20 billion in e-commerce every year. And then you say, okay, well, how much is Amazon paying in federal taxes? And you find that number is 0. So then you say, okay, so how do we make it so that $1 trillion tech company doesn't get away with 0 taxes? We have to join every other advanced economy in the world and have a value-added tax, which would then give the American public a tiny slice of every Amazon sale, every Google search, every Facebook ad, every robot truck mile. And because our economy now is so massive at $20 trillion, up $5 trillion in the last 12 years, a value-added tax at even half the European level would generate $800 billion in new revenue, which combined with current spending, economic growth, cost savings, and the value gains from having a stronger, healthier, more educated population would pay for a $1,000 dividend. You could also structure the VAT so that it falls more heavily on luxury goods than consumer staples, as one example. And so there are ways to tailor the VAT so that it ends up, again, getting you some of the gains from all this incredible innovation without falling disproportionately on working class Americans. No one's going to quit their job on $1,000 a month unless they're in a truly abusive or exploitative situation, at which point they probably should be able to leave. Right. So this is going to free us up to do more of the work that we want to do naturally. It's also going to recognize the kind of work that my wife does at home with our 2 boys every single day. Raising kids is the hardest, most challenging work there is, yet right now we value it at 0. If you look at our costs right now, inflation is centered in 3 areas: housing, education, and healthcare. If we had $1,000 a month, most of our consumer products would stay the same price, and I have separate plans to try and curb any price rises in those 3 areas. But those areas are not getting more expensive because we have money in our pockets. Unfortunately, it's the opposite. With an extra $1,000 a month, people's nutrition improves, kids' ability to learn goes up, and graduation rates go up over time. Stress levels improve, mental health improves. It would create over 2 million new jobs directly in the economy because the money would circulate through local businesses, and then each of those businesses would then have to turn around and hire an extra worker or 2. And so it's very pro-work. I see the freedom dividend as a base to build on. It's like the floor, $1,000 a month, where we can meet our basic needs, but that doesn't solve the problems. Then you have to start working on racial inequities, on gender inequities. We need to build a house on top of the foundation.
That's why we might even need to look at guaranteed income.
I agree with my friend Andrew Yang. I think universal basic income is a good idea.
In terms of the big legislative goals, we need to have universal background checks and red flag laws and ban automatic weapons. But the reality is we have over 300 million firearms already in this country. And whatever law we pass, those firearms are still out there. So how do you decrease supply? How do you make those guns safer? We should have a perpetual buyback, in effect, where anyone who wants to sell their gun gets some money, and then you can start reducing supply. The other thing you can do in this personalization of guns, you can make a grip that essentially knows whether it's the owner based upon the size of their hand, the pressure, and then if someone else tries to fire the gun, then it doesn't work. And that would be optional, but a lot of owners would love it, because who doesn't want a gun that's just yours? And a lot of gun owners have children. They know their children get a hold of the gun and tragedies can occur. So if you were to make it cost-free, you would see hundreds of thousands of these guns become personalized and then much, much safer. If someone kills someone with a gun, or if it's a mass shooting, what happens to the gun company's stocks the next day? They go up, that's right. So when there's a mass shooting, people run out and buy guns because they're afraid that legislation is coming, and so gun sales go up. And this is the most perverse, nasty set of incentives you can imagine. So ideally, you would have the gun companies themselves have to pay a fine anytime their product is used to kill an American. And then the incentives would be reversed very quickly, because if my firearm, my product gets used in a mass shooting, then all of a sudden I get hit with a $10 million fine the next day. Then do you think I might be more open to some legislation that helps bring the casualty rate down? Our focus needs to be to outcompete the Chinese. The fact is that they are positioned to potentially leapfrog us in artificial intelligence because they have more access to more data than we do, and their government is subsidizing their computing infrastructure at much higher levels. One of my proposals is a new world data organization that's analogous to the World Trade Organization, because right now China's developing its own technology ecosystem and is trying to export it to other countries. What we have to do is we have to set international standards and then say to the Chinese, look, you need to abide by democratic values, or at least not abuse your own people to these levels in order to join the World Data Organization. Well, I never would have pulled out of the multilateral nuclear agreement with Iran that ended up causing all of these provocations that have now been escalating to a point where we're at the brink of war. We need to keep them in line, where if Iran does something problematic, we need to let them know that that's not something we'll accept, but you don't do something that's going to precipitate a larger scale armed conflict. I would push the power to declare war back to Congress, where it belongs in our Constitution. I would repeal the AUMF and restore Congress's historical power to make these kinds of military decisions. We've been in a constant state of armed conflict for almost 20 years, and that's not the will of the American people. When I'm out campaigning across the country, people say we need to end the forever wars and bring our troops home, invest those resources right here at home. We spent over $6 trillion in the Middle East. Think about what that could have done for our families and communities over the last number of years. And I've been meeting with thousands of veterans who, when they come home, are still struggling with health issues, PTSD, trying to find jobs and opportunities. It's not just the resources, it's the human cost.
Would you put people in the military in your cabinet or with military experience?
Of course. We need to have people at the highest levels of government who have that kind of experience.
It's both an honor and disappointment to be the lone candidate of color on the stage tonight. I grew up the son of immigrants, and I had many racial epithets used against me as a kid. But Black and Latinos have something much more powerful working against them than words. They have numbers. The average net worth of a Black household is only 10% that of a white household. For Latinos, it's 12%. If you're a Black woman, you're 320% more likely to die from complications in childbirth. These are the numbers that define race in our country. And the question is, why am I the lone candidate of color on this stage? Fewer than 5% of Americans donate to political campaigns. You know what you need to donate to political campaigns? Disposable income. Our country is deeply misogynist, and most all of us know that. Money and men are tied together. The fact is, we operate in a fundamentally anti-woman marketplace, and that includes the marketplace for politicians. If we were to put 100 democracy dollars into the hands of every American voter, instead of 5% contributing, you'd see that rate skyrocket to 50 or 60%, and you'd have many, many more women who would run for office. I want to get rid of private prisons. It makes no sense to have prisons that have a profit motivation on the other side.
I want to get rid of a punitive cash bail system that essentially throws people in jail for being poor.
I believe everyone on this stage would do the right thing by Dreamers in the first 100 days. I would make it a top priority. I'm the son of immigrants myself. The fact is, almost half of Fortune 500 companies were started by an immigrant or children of immigrants. Immigrants make our country stronger and more dynamic. And immigrants are being scapegoated for issues they have absolutely nothing to do with.
Half of aging Americans will never actually be able to retire. And so we need to put in place, again, this foundation that will help Americans retire with dignity.
I have a son with special needs. Special needs children are going to become special needs adults in many cases. And here's the challenge. We go to employers and say, hey, this special needs person can be a contributor in your workplace, which may be correct, but that's not the point. We have to stop confusing economic value and human value. We have to be able to say to our kids and Kyle that you have intrinsic value because you're an American and you're a human being. We're going to put a freedom dividend of $1,000 a month in everyone's hands, which is going to help families around the country adapt. And then we're going to take this burden off of the communities and off of the schools who do not have the resources to support kids like my son and make it a federal priority.
Nobody knows who Andrew Yang is. He's not a politician, complete underdog, and surprisingly, actually, he's doing really well.
He's a serious person, smart and cares.
The Tesla CEO tweeted his support for the venture capitalist on Saturday.
Donald Glover, aka Childish Gambino, made a vague endorsement of the Democratic candidate Andrew Yang.
Andrew Yang raking in a personal best $16.5 million.
You have now outlasted governors, senators, billionaires.
You're raising issues that nobody else is talking about, and you're looking at it from a perspective that nobody else is really looking at it.
He's gone viral in a whole range of different communities.
Too smart, damn it. I have done the math. It's not left. It's not right. It's forward. And that is how we're going to beat Donald Trump in 2020.